Welcome to another episode of the State of African Agriculture. Today we have Dr. Eva Monterossa. She's a theme lead shaping markets for healthy and sustainable diets at the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition Gains. She has over 20 years of research and professional experience in maternal and child nutrition. She designs public health and market-based interventions to create demand for nutritious, sustainable foods. Our expertise lies in the domains of food choice, consumer insight research, social marketing, intervention design and planning, monitoring and evaluation. She's a social entrepreneur, having co-founded two initiatives: the Society for Implementation Science in Nutrition to address program implementation in the nutrition sector, and the Demand Generation Alliance to address food culture, preferences, and perceptions in society. Today we'll be discussing the demand generation for nutritious food. Thank you. So Eva, thank you for joining me today.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad. I'm so happy to have you because you're an expert when it comes to demand generation, behavioral change, and we want to find out what factors drive food choices, why it's important to tell people what they want, what they're missing, and what we can do to make nutritious food more desirable, accessible, and affordable. So glad you're here today. So let's get into it.
All right.
Based on your experience designing market-based interventions to generate demand for nutritious food, developing and emerging markets like Africa have a peculiar market, and that is based on their challenges, cultural dynamics, lack of awareness, and niche low-income households. What approach is GAIN taken to generate demand for nutritious food in these markets?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the easiest explanation I could provide, rather than give you all the nuts and bolts about how we do it, is just what you see. And I think the best approach that's out there right now draws from the private sector. So I think for us, branding provides the best example for how to engage with consumers for a couple of reasons. One, it provides sort of that visual mark to the consumer and the underlying ideas that you can communicate for a very long time, essentially. Whereas the default mode right now in the development sector has been just to do a series of campaigns, and campaigns by definition are short-lived. So what branding does, it allows the longevity of your ideas and allows you to communicate in a different way to the consumer, because as you well know, brands speak to what consumers want, what they need, what they value. And it's just a very different approach to, it's a different way to engage the consumers versus talking to the consumer.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad that you mentioned more of short-lived campaigns, but I want to get into that because raising awareness and understanding nutritional benefits to generate these nutritious foods has been a challenge due based on the short-lived campaigns. And a lot of factors that we have make it hard for consumers to stay eating nutritious food. The lack of awareness, fruits and vegetables are expensive. We have post-harvest loss when it comes to fruit and vegetables, but also processed food tends to be cheaper and they're readily available and convenient. So how can we mitigate these challenges while we make sure that nutritious food continue to stay on the mind of the consumer, especially when the campaign is over?
Yeah, again, the brand offers you that solution. So, and you know well that a campaign is a strong burst of activity, of advertising, but you can continue a brand's presence in the marketplace without having to spend a lot of money. But once you've created that idea of the brand in the consumer's mind, just short reminders of that is probably all that's needed to continue the longevity, and interspersed with stronger campaigns when you want to talk about a specific idea. And I think yeah, undoubtedly, I mean, the processed foods being more affordable, processed foods are often more palatable than the lowly fruit and vegetable, but ultimately I wouldn't say if you ask any consumer, of course they want to eat healthfully. And there's just a lot of things that get in the way of them being able to do that. So understanding the consumer's lived experience, and being able to position your ideas in the top of mind, well, that's part of the art and science of the world, of advertising and world of marketing. Um, so again, it's about finding the right partners, the right research partners on the ground who can really understand these consumers' lived experiences, and then finding the right agencies that help you translate those ideas into creative assets for your brand.
Okay, so Eva, can you give us an example of some like a campaign that you've done in the past in Africa?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I think there's been a couple of examples. I mean, the we're working on developing a brand in Kenya, and it's right now it's called Fit Foods, and the brand essentially is trying to speak to parents and really understands with parents' um, desire to provide healthy diets for their children, but acknowledges that this is not an easy thing to do, right? Children fight back, they want other things, and there's other competing pressures on parents' time. So the brand will try to be that support in the marketplace to help parents make better choices at different points of purchase, at different eating occasions. Um, and that campaign has yet to launch. So we're in the period of developing the initial campaigns and producing the materials. I think another one we've done, and this one you're familiar with, was the work we did in Nigeria with the egg campaign for children. And that campaign was called Eggs Make Kids. And again, sort of speaking to parents and speaking to their desire of being able to feed their children good, nutritious foods to support their development. And so that campaign also tried to position in parents' mind the idea that these foods are actually a good choice. So when you're out there buying foods for your family, to please consider eggs as one of those foods in your shopping basket, essentially.
Okay. I noticed for both campaigns you mentioned, you're focusing more on like the vendors selling it. Why is that instrumental in campaigns like this?
Um, I mean, so ultimately what we want to do and demand is drive purchases, right? So if something isn't bought, then it's it's an
Yeah.
idea that just lives in the marketplace and that's it. So you really want to meet consumers at that point of purchase. So involving the vendors in that process is really important for them to be able to take up your brand messages, your core ideas, and be able to communicate with the consumer in a way that is also appealing. Um,
Okay.
so so that interplay between consumer and sort of that last mile is also quite important and sometimes often overlooked.
It's actually interesting to me. So I wanted us to go into public-private partnerships. Public-private partnerships tend to be more successful in agricultural programs when stakeholders can collaborate. So with these kind of programs, how can we leverage on these kind of partnerships to create demand? So who are like the stakeholders in these kind of campaigns?
Yeah, these are actually campaigns are a really nice opportunity for those kind of collaborations to come together. Um, and brands in particular provide that opportunity. So, again, going back to the example of Kenya, if the brand is a public good owned by, let's say, an organization like Gain or the government, whichever that might happen to be, um, that is more focused on the civil society or the consumer. Other private entities can participate through the brand. So there are opportunities to collaborate, especially most people think about, partnership opportunities with large companies, but there's a lot of opportunities even for small and medium enterprises to sort of lock in to the brand, to its ideas, and be able to sort of cross promote.
Have you had instances where governments, in terms of government partnerships in these areas?
Yeah, there was I this is something I did in my past life. I
Mhm.
worked on in Ghana. We were doing some work again in collaboration with the local FDA, and the point was to develop. And this happens a lot in fortification, for example. That's a really good example where government and private entities collaborate. So in this case, in Ghana, we were also working to develop a fortification seal or brand that would cover a large array of fortified products in the marketplace. And so, the government was playing more of a regulatory role, ensuring that the fortification standards were being adhered to. And the entity I was working with was helping to promote the marketing, to do marketing and promotions. And then the private sector was, of course, participating in their own sales of their own products and branding their own products with the seal. So it was really a nice combination of government from a regulatory perspective, civil society helping to support the marketing and promotions work of the seal, and then private entities coming in to cross promote and then adhere to the seal standards, for example.
Yeah, that's interesting because when government is, part of it, is always great when they can own it and take over from it. And see. I want to go into SMEs. SMEs produce 80% of food production in Africa. And I think they're instrumental in promoting nutritious food and even access to nutritious food. Financially sustainable and scalable models that deliver nutritious food to consumers are critical to achieve our nutrition goals. But it's difficult to scale up compared to other parts of the world due to, capital, policy constraints, and other limited resources. How can we attract commercial investments into the SME sector the SME sectors, those producing food can be used to improve access to nutritious food?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I mean, I think the number one, you could say that, or one of the most important requests from SMEs that we've spoken to is our line of credits. So for them to have enough working capital for them to be able to sort of run their business, so to speak. And I think that's a challenge for SMEs in any part of the world. I don't think it's specific to the African continent. I'm not a financial expert, so it's really hard for me to comment on the type of financial instruments that are required. But I think, most people are most likely to invest when they see that the overall business plan is solid. And again, these type of opportunities where SMEs can participate or be part of someone that's sort of doing some of this market shaping. It could be the government that might be involved in shaping the market for nutritious foods, or it might be a civil society sector. And for them to show that, they're participating in this process, or someone's actively trying to cultivate that market, I think would also help investors think that some of the risk in launching, because it's a very risky thing to do, to launch a new product or to sell some of these foods for the reasons you've also pointed out, because they're perishable, etc. That someone is out there trying to mitigate some of the risks and really ensuring that the pipeline of product is moving throughout the entire value chain. And I think those kind of collaborations are important.
And I would hope that, now that, with what the world is facing, with the pandemic, climate issues, and just, the Russia-Ukraine one, people are trying to take nutrition more seriously. So I would hope that, when investors are looking into that space, they are looking into, investing in consumer businesses that are actually producing nutritious food to make it more attractive. So it's some work that we need to work on and see. I want to go back to, the government, to government, more like government and policy. Larger companies are well positioned to produce low cost, nutritious food. And with the African Union making nutrition a priority, what policies can African leaders make to ensure that large companies play a crucial role or be part of actually producing nutritious food?
Yeah, that's a really big policy question. I don't know that I have the right answers for that type of, food system transformation. But I guess from my perspective, from sitting and working on this side and looking at it from the consumer side, I think, a couple of things that larger companies could do is to ensure greater affordability of some of these products. So that's one thing. And sort of, I don't know what type of policy instruments would be the most appropriate to do so, or what type of incentives could be provided to companies, either through tax breaks or R&D incentives, through, collaborations with universities or other research institutes. That might be one. So affordability is a key issue that companies can help support. Availability is another one. These large companies have really great distribution capacities. And so oftentimes either they're working with third-party distributors that only distribute these products. So in what ways can these companies be incentivized so that they can incentivize folks that participate in their distribution chain to also move other nutritious products? So that's an open question. I don't know the answer to that, but it's an area that's nice. It's ripe for collaboration. Like what kind of things might we do, right? The other thing that companies have to do is also take a role of being more socially responsible and understanding that within, the countries which they derive capital from, right? So their sales from, and to understand what are the kind of public health issues and in which way is the company contributing to either not making it worse,
Yeah.
because that would be a really good thing. But so that, I think that is the first thing we should be asking these companies. And I think the second step is what can we do to make it better? So these are two separate questions that require different types of policy instruments, but being very clear to these large companies that at the minimum, we don't need companies contributing to the problem. And at the very best, we should have companies contributing as, as part of the solution.
That's a good one, especially and policy workers can learn from that and say, but I definitely, companies can be part of the solution. So it's how they want to take it and say. So we're hoping that they do better and do good. So what advice, so rounded up, what advice would you give to SMEs producing nutritious food or SMEs producing it in terms of branding or marketing and people that are interested of going into that sector, the nutrition value food chain? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really tough to be an SME in the market in sub-Saharan Africa today. I think there's a number of challenges. Um, but I think one area, if it's the area of marketing and consumer insights that they would be interested in, is to find organizations that offer those type of services. Now, there might be their own associations, or maybe an association in the country that might be doing that. And to understand that SMEs also sell to a different market segment, like a lot of medium to large and multinational companies really cater to the upper class, which they're a small segment of the population, but they're your major purchasing. They have the major purchasing power in a given country, and that's all well and good, and that's needed. But what about the rest of us? And so, also really ensuring that our market and consumer insights are capturing, what's called the base of the pyramid, and not just our middle income, because that's also called base of the pyramid, but the lower um, and most poor, because there are opportunities here for companies to capital, to do good at the same time that they're also earning a return on their investment. So yeah, just I guess it's a plea for companies to also think about, and for associations and other marketing associations to think about the base of the pyramid and doing more consumer insight research into those groups.
Thank you. Well, the last, I think you kind of answered that. I wanted to ask you how, SMEs compete with larger organizations that have, they have the funds to, use various brother marketing channels. So for SMEs, I guess it's one of the things you answered, just focus on your niche market and see how, would you like
Yeah,
to
I
add to
mean,
that?
yeah, so I mean, we all know the guerrilla marketing tactics work really well. And fortunately, in a place like Africa that is highly social, that type of peer-to-peer marketing is quite effective. And that tends to be, or word of mouth tends to be a lot more affordable than, let's say, what people understand advertising to be, which is what, goes out on TV and radio. But I think they're never going to be able to compete with, the advertising budgets of these large companies. So I would say, don't even bother. I think this is again where public-private, partnerships come into play, is to say, is there an association of SMEs? Is there enough of us SMEs producing, let's say, 4 to 5 products that we can go to the government and say we want to support, um, then in whichever way possible, marketing efforts that, support advertising of fortified products, or if you're a company that's making canned fruits and vegetables, for example. So in which ways can you align yourself with other competitors in your category and help create and go back to the government and say, we need your help in helping us create that market, or other civil society actors who are interested in this space, and how might those interests and needs align to benefit the SMEs, benefit society by ensuring that more of these products are on the market.
I like that. And, government also needs to be responsible in helping, putting SMEs and supporting them also. So it helps them, maybe if they get some kind of support in to incentivize them to make sure they keep producing. To wrap it up, finally, and I said that twice, what in terms of like years, where do you see nutritious food? Where do you see nutritious food in 5, 10 years? Do you think we have played a part in promoting it? Do you think we still have a lot of work to do? Where do you think we're at?
Yeah, I think we still have a lot of work to do. And I think part is the promotion work. Another part is the sort of the access piece, so affordability and availability. And the other element that remains to still be dealt with in the continent is perishability. So I think those are the challenges that remain with nutritious foods. And I think if all of those three pieces could be, I don't see them being addressed very well in 5 years. I think we will need more than 5 years' time. But, in the next 15 to 20 years, I think a lot of these challenges hopefully will have been addressed by the entrepreneurs of today and the new generation of entrepreneurs that are up and coming. Wandie, you mentioned something about the role of governments, and I just want to emphasize that yes, governments have a role, and they have a role for shaping markets, undoubtedly. But I also think SMEs have an important role. And often SMEs think, well, my job is to just promote my product. But if you are struggling to develop a market, it's also your job to forge the networks and to collaborate with your competitors in many ways and with the government to ensure that you have the opportunity to compete. Because if you just focus on yourself, then you also are not contributing to shaping that market. So a marketplace that's competitive, that speaks to the consumer, and then allows the consumer to derive maximum value from the offerings that are on the market.
So that's very interesting because mostly businesses shape, policy or move policies, create policies. So that is very important. Thank you, Eva.
You're
This was
welcome.
very informative. I'm sure SMEs can learn a lot from you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.